In our spotlight tonight, a guy who hates me. Last week on Morning Joe, I got into an argument with Glenn Greenwald, a blogger for Salon.com. Here's how it started.
I just want to underscore one point, which is about these labels. I mean, if you look at who actually lost in this election, it wasn't the liberals who lost. The Progressive Caucus was reelected by a rate of 95%. The people who bore the brunt of the electoral bloodbath were the Blue Dogs. 50% of the Blue Dogs. No, you were on television all night pointing to people like Russ Feingold.
Where do the liberals live?
Right. Well, you were on television.
Where do they live?
Well, for Alan Grayson lives in a district that has been Republican for decades, and you pointed to his loss as proof that liberalism fails.
And it went downhill from there. You can see the full version of it on our website. I think I interrupted Glenn more than I should have. I shouldn't have interrupted him at all. And I told him immediately after that show that I wanted to come on this show to continue the discussion. My basic complaint to Glenn was that his blog about what a terrible job I did on election night misquoted me. It actually didn't quote me at all. It summarized what I said in a way that wasn't supported by the actual quotes of what I said on election night. Now, since then, Glenn has done a thorough job, which you can see on our website and his website, of juxtaposing what I actually said with what Glenn thinks I said and what I don't think I said. You can go there. You can make your own judgment. We don't have to get into that argument again here about how accurately Glenn summarized my comments. Joining me now from Rio de Janeiro for what we both hope is a more civilized continuation of the discussion we began last week, Glenn Greenwald of Salon.com. Glenn, I know most people, when they do guest shots on these kinds of shows and you're allowed 8 minutes and 6 minutes, whatever it is, you leave thinking, I wish I'd said this, I wish I'd said that. Pick it up right now with what you wish you could have said if we had more time Friday morning on Morning Joe.
Sure. Well, I was actually pretty satisfied with the things I was able to say, although I do want to add what I think is the critical point, and I tried making this point, and hopefully we can talk about it a little more thoroughly now, which is I think the lesson from the 2010 election and from the Democrats' resounding defeat is that if you are a party in power, you essentially need to do two things in order to win an election. Number one is you need to have a coherent message about what you stand for and effectively communicate that to the citizenry. And secondly, and more important, is you need to enact policies that actually benefit people's lives in a perceptible and tangible way, and that help them alleviate the problems and suffering that they have. And I think Democrats in this election didn't lose because they were too liberal. They lost because they failed to do either of those in the minds of voters. And the Blue Dogs, their reliance prominently on Blue Dogs as part of their party and their party identity, was a major reason, not the only reason, but a major reason why they failed and why they lost the election.
But, Glenn, my point about Blue Dogs is you cannot have a Chairman Barney Frank, you cannot have a Speaker Nancy Pelosi, liberals from each end, each coast in powerful positions in the House, without Blue Dogs in the House to vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. When you lose the Blue Dogs, you lose the majority.
Okay, and here's why I fundamentally disagree with you on that. And if you look at what happened in 2010, I think everybody agrees that voters didn't vote for the Republican Party because they suddenly loved Republicans. They voted for Republicans because there was a wave election in hostility to the Democratic Party. In 2006 and 2008, the same thing happened, but in reverse. People didn't vote for the Democratic Party because they loved Democrats. They were furious with Republicans over the Iraq War, over Republican corruption. It was a wave election, and the Democrats could have had a lot of progressives in those swing districts who could have gotten elected. And in fact, many progressives did get elected in conservative districts that people say could never happen. Alan Grayson did, Carol Shea Porter in New Hampshire, John Yarmouth in Kentucky, Jerry McInerney in California. These were solid progressives who ran as unapologetic progressives who won and removed Republican incumbents and won in conservative or swing districts. The problem is that the DCCC wanted to follow the standard D.C. advice, which which was the country hates liberalism, Democrats must move to the right, and they forced a bunch of former Republican blue dogs into those seats when they could have had progressives in there, and they built this huge majority with a bunch of people who don't share any of the Democratic views, when it would have been far better to have a smaller, more ideologically cohesive majority that could have gotten a lot more done for the American people.
So, Glenn, knowing the congressional district map as you do in the 50 United States, you believe that there are 220 districts in the United States, let's say. Let's just give Nancy Pelosi a majority of 6, okay? And there's 220 seats in this country that you can win with liberal candidates.
Well, you mean with liberal candidates or something short of blue dogs? I mean, I wouldn't recommend candidates running around the Deep South or the West saying, hi, I'm a liberal, please vote for me. That's what I think is so important, too, is that these labels are not really significant. What actually matters is the policies that people support. And let's just have clarity on this, which is, you know, this is what I think is critical about blue dogs. When we talk about blue dogs, we're not really talking about people who are moderates or centrists. And then the segment before, I heard somebody, Luke Russert, say that, you know, Steny Hoyer represents the blue dogs who are fiscally conservative and fiscally responsible. They're not fiscally conservative. The blue dogs almost uniformly endorsed all the policies that busted the budget, from the Iraq War and endless war to tax cuts for the rich, without any concern for how they're going to be paid for. What blue dogs are is servants of Wall Street. They're loyalists to the corporate and lobbyist class. And when you incorporate all of those people into the Democratic Party, you water down the message, you prevent policies from being enacted that help ordinary Americans because they block them. And no, you do not need to go to Wall Street loyalists in order to build a Democratic majority. Democrats should have confidence in their position to go to the American people and say, here's what we believe in, and to convince them, the American people, that that is the right way of looking at things. I think Democrats can do that.
Glenn, when is the last time you saw a Democratic majority in the Congress that fits the description of the Democratic majority in the Congress that you would like to see?
Well, I think, you know, essentially we had that all the way up until the Gingrich Revolution. And since then, you know, Democrats have had periods of time when they've won majorities. But the problem is that pretty much beginning in the mid-1990s, in the mid-1990s, the Democrats got convinced that they had to follow the advice of Dick Morris and the DLC, and that the only way they could win, or the best way they could win, was by moving to the right. And I think that policy has been a failure. Prior to that, in the 70s and 60s and 50s, they had all kinds of majorities that way because Reagan changed the way the electorate thought about politics. Obama said that he wanted to be that kind of transformational president, too, to go before the people and say, this is the right way of looking at politics.
Well, you know, I was working in the Congress when you think this House of Representatives existed right up to 1994. Let's remember, in 1994, with that liberal majority in the House, they couldn't even get a health care bill out of John Dingell's committee. It couldn't report a bill. No bill, no health care bill ever went to the floor of the House to even be debated or voted on. This blue dog Congress that we just lost, this blue dog dominated, in your view, Democratic House of Representatives passed a health care bill that the Congress you liked in 1994 couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Democratic Congress had good achievements. I think those achievements would have been much better had the Democrats not followed the Rahm Emanuel standard D.C. strategy of let's build a majority by moving as far as possible to the right. I mean, one of the reasons why I think Americans ended up disliking the health care bill was because it didn't kick in soon enough, so they didn't perceive that there were benefits in their lives. Those won't happen until 2014. There was no public option to compete with the private health insurance industry that Americans hate, and so the Republican demagoguery that you're going to be forced to buy private health insurance from the private health insurance industry actually worked because it was true. And you see this down the line. I mean, you're right to point to exit polls saying that people avoid the label liberal. But if you look at individual policies that typically get labeled liberal, from harder financial regulations to the public option to preserving and protecting Social Security and Medicare to cutting defense spending, these are all policies that blue dogs wants typically and continuously water down and prevent from being enacted, I think Democrats would be much more popular if they didn't rely on candidates who constantly negated their own views. And they could build a majority, not by having hardcore self-identified liberals running in conservative districts, but by having people who weren't servants of Wall Street, who are just willing to put a D after their name in order to get elected, be such an integral part of the electoral strategy.
Glenn, as I said, I disagree with your summary of what I was saying on election night, and one of the things you said was I was blaming liberals, which I don't think I was, but we're going to leave that for the nice juxtaposition you've set up on your website about my actual video and what I said and what you've summarized I said. But I want to close the segment with something that I did on television a few years ago, because this is important to me. There is no one in any sector of the television business who has defended liberals, and specifically the word liberal, to a larger audience than I have. I want to show you a scene that I wrote for The West Wing in 2005. It's what I have always wanted to hear a candidate say when accused of being a liberal.
I know you like to use that word liberal as if it were a crime.
No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have used that word. I know Democrats think liberal is a bad word. So bad you had to change it, didn't you? What do you call yourselves now? Progressives?
It's true. Republicans have tried to turn liberal into a bad word. Well, liberals ended slavery in this country.
A Republican president ended slavery.
Yes. A liberal Republican. What happened to them? They got run out of your party. Well, what did liberals do that was so offensive to the Republican Party, Senator? I'll tell you what they did. Liberals got women the right to vote. Liberals got African Americans the right to vote. Liberals created Social Security and lifted millions of elderly people out of poverty. Liberals ended segregation. Liberals passed the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. Liberals created Medicare. Liberals passed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. What did conservatives do? They opposed every one of those programs. Every one. So when you try to hurl that word liberal at my feet as if it were something dirty, something to run away from, something that I should be ashamed of, it won't work, Senator, because I will pick up that label and I will wear it as a badge of honor.
It is Glenn Greenwald of Salon.com. I wish we had more time. Jimmy Smith's just used up the rest of your time. Thank you very much for restoring sanity to our debate.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Lawrence.